when you start to step outside the box, you have to start to say no. You have to start to say no to the things around you and edit the people around you that aren't aligning with who you are, because you're different. And because you're different, you have to step outside of the box, and you have to say no, and you have to actually risk something.
The Tony Bova Show, built by pain, designed for freedom.
Welcome to the Tony Bova Podcast. We are relentless by design. Today, I'm very excited to share a controversial story that Sabrina and I had in the beginning parts of our relationship. It's one of the go-to stories I share because it's so simple, but yet it can apply to so many different things within your relationship or within your profession. Wherever you are, it's truly a testament to authenticity, the 3 lessons that I learned at the end of it. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about why Sabrina got so upset and how she actually ended up respecting me more for it at the end of it. The story that I want to tell you about is when Sabrina told me that she missed me and I didn't tell her back. And I did something that pretty much no man would ever do in that particular situation that was so risky. But at the end of it all, what happened was that she ended up feeling safer and more respect for me because of how I held the line in it. Now, as I start to tell you about the story, Sabrina and I were dating long distance. We were, she was down in Florida and I was up in Massachusetts, and we wouldn't see each other that often, maybe once or twice a month. And throughout that time, it took me a long time to commit to her because I'd just been through a lot of relationship issues in the past, and I knew I went too fast all the time. I would commit too fast, I would jump in too fast, and at this point in my life, in my dating life, and all of the relationships that I went through at that point, I knew I needed to go slower. I needed to actually hold in, not to what I felt, but really to observe what was actually true. And throughout that process, this was one of the tests that I gave her throughout that kind of showed me whether or not she was the girl for me or not. And it wasn't, I did this intentionally in the moment, but it was just something that I had built up inside of me over all the experience that I had been through. But in this particular day, I was at work. She sends me a text. It's a pretty common text. I miss you. She told me she missed me. And in that exact moment, I did not miss her. I wasn't sure if we were going to be something long-term at that point. I had other things on my mind, and I intentionally didn't tell her I missed her back, because in that moment I had to make a decision whether or not I actually wanted to tell her that I missed her because I wanted to make her feel better, or if I really wanted to own my own truth and just kind of risk it and not say anything at all. So I did that intentionally, and I knew that there was probably going to come back with a conversation, which I was happy to have with her. So the next day, she sends me a message. She says, "Hey, do you have some space to talk? I'm really upset about something." And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. Of course. I would totally love to talk to you about it." And when she came to me and she said, I told you I missed you yesterday. You didn't say it back, and that really hurt my feelings. And I went, yeah. Ooh. Yeah, no, I totally understand. I totally get why that would hurt your feelings. Can I explain why I didn't say it? Because I didn't say it intentionally. And she said, "Oh, well, yeah, I would love to hear why you didn't say it intentionally." And so then I explained to her that if I had said I missed her when I didn't miss her, what I would be doing was I would be telling her something that wasn't true for me. And if I told her something that wasn't true for me now, in the beginning part of our relationship, then it was going to set us up for failure in the end, because I had been here so many times in the past where I had said something I didn't fully mean and didn't own it in that moment, and it caused problems later. And so what I explained to her further is that if I was to tell you that now, I would become really unsafe for you. And over time, I would say yes to you more than was actually what was true for me. And then you would start to sense that because you're intuitive, because you're a woman, and you feel these things, and you would start to not trust me. And then you would start to lose respect for me. And then you would start to not be attracted to me at the end of it. And so I actually want this to have an opportunity to be a long-term relationship, that's something like you could be my life partner. And when I framed it to her that way, she was like, "Whoa, wow, I really appreciate you doing that. That makes so much sense." And I think what happens for us as guys is, in the moment, what we think is going to calm the situation is actually going to add gasoline to it. Because when we start telling our partners, our women, that, something that's not actually true for us, it ends up biting us in the ass later. Because as time goes on, as it starts to get uncovered and we have that resentment, that bitterness, that frustration that continues to build up because we're not owning our own truth, then we start to become really safe. And the thing you have to understand about, especially in relationships, and I think this can be applied to every area of your life, whether it's fitness or your business or whatever it is, but especially in relationships, everything is felt. Even us as men, even though we want to hold that back. And so as things are felt, then it becomes this energy. It becomes this energy that even though everybody says something's fine, it's not. Because when we start to look at communication, about 10% of communication is actually verbal. It's not actually the words that are coming out of your mouth that are becoming the communication that somebody's looking through a certain lens, that perspective, especially when it comes to women, because they're so sensitive and they feel everything. They're not necessarily listening to all of the words, but they're picking up on everything else around it. And when we start to understand, when I start to tell her something that is meant to please her, that is supposed to calm that situation down in that exact moment, what we're actually doing is causing it to become a bigger issue down the road, right? We're kicking the can down the road. But when that can gets kicked down the road, what happens is it gets bigger and bigger over time. And so the three things that I want to point out to you that are going to be really helpful for you to start to own your own truth, for you to gain respect, for you to become the version of a man that is able to say something risky to in your relationship or within society itself or within your business, however it is that you need to be able to own your own truth, become a better leader. This is where leadership really flourishes, is when we start to own our own truth and we're able to communicate. We're able to own our own flaws. We're able to have those uncomfortable conversations. This is what sets us up for those uncomfortable conversations, which makes us a much, much better man. Owning your truth, the first thing you have to recognize is owning your truth is a risk. It's always going to be a risk to own your truth, because what you're doing is you're stepping outside of the perspective that everybody else has you in. You're stepping outside of the box that you've been put in since you were a kid, throughout you growing up and throughout society. You step outside that box, and because you're stepping outside that box, everyone is starting to say, no, that's not you. That's not who we know you are to be. And then you start to get nervous, you get to get anxious, you get to get scared. Because if we start to step outside the box and really become ourselves, then we're met with this space of rejection. And I'll be honest, I think rejection is one of the greatest things for men, because we're really truly designed for it. But in that space of rejection is risk. And when we start to own the risk of what is actually going to happen, what actually happens if I own my truth and I step further and further into the version I know I'm capable of being, I know who I am at the core of my identity. Because when you start to step outside the box, you have to start to say no. You have to start to say no to the things around you and edit the people around you that aren't aligning with who you are, because you're different. And because you're different, you have to step outside of the box, and you have to say no, and you have to actually risk something. So the first part of all of this is that you have to risk. And then the second part is that the risk itself makes you more safe and more respectable. You see, when we start to lean into the fear of the risk, what we start to realize is the fear itself is the thing that's holding us back. Because 9 times out of 10, whatever the fear is around the decision you have to make or the action you have to take, it doesn't actually happen. And so the actually stepping into the risk of it is the thing that makes you more respectable, because you're willing to actually own the risk. So if you're willing to own it, you don't become a yes man. What you do is you actually say, I actually have an opinion. I actually have my own belief system. And because it doesn't align with you, I'm going to do it graciously with you. I don't have to be a jerk, but I'm going to say that doesn't align with me, and that's okay. There's so many things that Sabrina and I don't align on. And she's comfortable with that, because she appreciates that, because at the end of the day, she knows that I'm not going to just say yes to her, and she can trust what I have to say. You know, we have a little bit of a running joke where she'll ask me a question about something. Maybe it's something she's wearing, or maybe it's something that she, she wants my opinion on. And I'll tell her it's kind of my subtle way of sharing, are you sure? Or you kind of know what the answer is going to be, is I'll ask her, I say, are you sure you want me to answer that? And I'll tell you 9 times out of 10, she'll say, actually, no, never mind. I don't want to know the answer, because she doesn't feel like she's ready for it in that moment. And I'm like, that's okay. And I don't have to share that answer with her at the end of that, because she knows she's not ready and she'll come around to it when she is. But because I do that with her, she knows that she can trust me, so that when it really matters, so when it really comes down to it, she doesn't have to worry about whether or not I'm actually just going to say yes to her to make her happy, and that I don't really actually have what it takes to take care of her and step into something that's uncomfortable or have an uncomfortable conversation. Because let me tell you this, fellas. Let me tell you very specifically that at the end of that uncomfortable conversation is the relationship that you're actually really looking for. You see, when we risk in relationship, we're stepping towards an edge of something, and that's what creates polarity. The polarity in itself is the thing that creates the attraction and the draw and the excitement. Because we're different, because we're designed differently, that's why we're perfectly matched. So the third thing I want to tell you is that at the end of the day, if you have to hide, then you're not really living life. And so when you start to look at those 3 things, is that you have to own your truth at the risk of it. And that you have to risk itself is the thing that makes you safer and more respected. And then when you start to look at, if you have to hide at the end of the day, that you're not actually living, you start to understand that the risk is worth it. When we start to understand that the risk is worth it, because those conversations aren't going to be clean. They might be messy at first. As you start to do something that's different, what's going to happen is you're going to hit resistance. And that resistance is the test. It's the test to see whether or not you have what it takes to actually become that version of yourself. Because I know you listening to this podcast are not the average guy. I know that you are not the one that just wants to have the life that's a status quo. That you don't want everything just to be normal, that you actually have drive, that you want to be challenged, you actually want to be expanded and become that version of yourself that you know you're capable of. Well, it all starts with the risk of it. It all starts with the uncomfortable conversations. It all starts with you leaning into who you really are, so that you start drawing in the people that are meant for you. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast. I'm Tony Bova, your host, and I want to remind you that you are built by pain and that you're designed for freedom. Thank you.